So welcome everybody. Today is our 34th Platform Academy session in this forum. I am so excited to welcome Julia to our Academy today. She's been on this show before, on this webinar. It's been a while. It was actually the 10th Academy, so it's been over a year. I can't believe it's been this long, but the good part about it, the good news is that we have so many new updates that we can report on, so many improvements, feature enhancements for our favorite topic of the day, and that is Decision Builder. So before we get into this, I will do a quick introduction of myself and then Julia. My name is Lisa Hohenstein. I'm an outbound product manager. I live in Germany. I have 2 cats who are currently locked outside of my office, so we can do this. I have been with the company for about 4 years, and my major product areas are workflow automation, and that includes Flow Designer, Process Automation Designer, but also, of course, Decision Builder, one of my favorite features on the platform. So for a quick introduction, over to you, Julia.
All right, thanks, Lisa. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone from wherever you are. My name is Julia Perlis. I am a principal product manager at ServiceNow. I focus predominantly on Decision Builder and decision management as a part of the workflow automation team. So I also work really closely with PMs who focus on Flow Designer, Process Automation Designer, and all of the initiatives that tie them together, like Lisa. I'm talking to you from Chicago, Illinois. I also have 2 cats. They are locked away, which is both a benefit and a loss. I've been at ServiceNow about 3 years now, if I can math correctly. And yeah, I'm glad to be back here on the Academy and talk a little bit about what's been going on with the product for the last couple of years and hear from folks on the call with any questions, either in this moment or when you play around and have feedback and thoughts later.
Awesome. Just to be safe, we have our safe harbor statement. You know this one. If we're talking about forward-looking features of the product, things may change, so please don't make any purchasing decisions based on this. And with that, I think we can get into the agenda before I let Julia take over.
There we go.
We have awesome topics today. We will, of course, talk about Decision Builder. Julia will tell us a little bit about what the product is for those who haven't seen it before. We'll get a little bit into the history of when we published it the first time, how it got to be where it is today. Since we haven't talked about Decision Builder in over a year, 1.5 years, we have 3 whole releases to catch up in awesome features. So we'll go through these, and then Julia, I think, has some little demos prepared for you so that we can see Decision Builder in action. All right, over to you.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much, Lisa. And Lisa, I will lean on you to interrupt with any Q&A or chat that is relevant to our conversation, because there's only so much multitasking.
I will absolutely keep an eye on that.
Okay, fantastic. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us to talk about Decision Builder. I assume people on this call have mixed experience. Either they've used it before, or they've heard of it, or they have no idea what this is and we're just curious from the name of the session. So I'll try to kind of make sure that I'm speaking to all audiences and giving people the right context to understand, where these features we're talking about fit and what the purpose is. So before we dive in on anything new, I want to take a minute and talk a little bit about what Decision Builder is. What you're looking at in this screenshot is an example of a decision table. Decision Builder is a store application that is used to create and manage decision tables. Decision tables are a capability that have been part of the platform since Madrid, and we'll talk a little bit about the evolution of the experience, but really what it is at its core is a way to organize and manage and create business logic separate from where you use that logic. So if you look at a decision table like what we're taking a look at here, this is managing the logic for what assignment group will do fulfillment for a request and whether that request requires an approval or not. And it's all based on a set of criteria that is consumed by the decision table through these input variables. So the overall purpose of a decision table that you create in Decision Builder is to store and manage logic. And then what you can do with that, since your logic is in one place, is use it in multiple places across the platform. And you can simplify and streamline all of your code and all of your flows. And this will become a lot more clear through the demos. But what I'm sure many of you have experienced is that you end up hard coding a lot of your what some would call business logic or decision rules or business rules right into your code. So you might actually have a flow with a bunch of if statements that say if billable is equal to false, then check if the item price is less than $700, and your flow becomes 30 actions very quickly because you're trying to account for all of the logic.
Oh, yeah.
And as soon as the logic changes, you are hitting your head against a wall, because that means that you need to totally go back, change the flow, rebuild and retest everything you're doing, even if the actual process or flow itself has not changed. And so by splitting out your logic from the places you're using that logic, it actually makes it easier to manage both. You can use a purpose-built user interface like this to more easily track all of these conditions and if statements and cases. And then when you actually work on your flows and work on your scripts, they are much more streamlined and have far fewer values hard-coded in them.
Yeah, we have one comment in chat for this, and Jose tells us that decision tables are the most under the radar capability, at least for his company. So they hope they're to learn to advocate it. I am all for it. I 100% agree. When I went to Knowledge last year, I had a couple of people walk up to me after I presented or included decision tables in my process automation designer lab. And people were like, I didn't know this existed. This is amazing. This will help us so much. So absolutely underrated, and all for advocating for it.
Yes, we're very sneaky, but not on purpose.
Yes.
I honestly, I find that myself. I think I'm really irritating to work with sometimes, because when I'm looking at people's flows, I'm like, oh, but if you just use a decision table for this, it would be so much better. And like at a certain point, I'm just a broken record. But the truth is, there really is just like so much opportunity in making things much more flexible when you don't need to just like hard code values and change things all the time, which I think dovetails nicely into a quick run through of some of the key benefits. And this is what we're trying to help all of our customers unlock with this product. We invest in things because we think there is a tangible benefit for all of our customers. And for Decision Builder, the two kind of categories of things that we hope that you get from it is the ability to simplify app development and maintenance. So not only are you capturing your logic in one place, but you can use it in multiple places. I'm sure we've all had that experience of, there's eligibility criteria that you need in this script and this flow, and you write it twice and then it changes, and you need to remember where you had it implemented. You need to change it in two places. You need to try to keep everything synced up. So this tries to reduce some of that friction. I talked about simplifying flows and scripts. We'll see that through the demo. You can reduce your change burden. You only change logic when logic changes, not changing your code as well. And then on the other side, ideally, by leveraging Decision Builder, you can also empower business SMEs to own more business logic. It is still predominantly like a develop in sub-prod experience and then promote to production. That's the best practice for doing it. But if you have any sort of like process owners or business stakeholders who are working in your instance and are comfortable in a low-code environment, this really broadens the window for who can keep track of logic, who can build logic, who can manage logic. We have roles for different access levels, which we'll take a look at. Those are new since we last did an Academy. And we also have an Excel export and import feature as a way to manage large tables, but also bring in some of those business stakeholders who may not be in ServiceNow much at all in a backend capacity, or who may just be much more comfortable working in Excel.
So when you're saying simplifying flows and scripts, that means we can also replace some script includes maybe with a decision table that you can call from other places like flows, but also scripts.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually brings us here, kind of where you can use decision tables. So, and you'll hear me talk and Lisa and I speak in this presentation about decision tables versus Decision Builder. It's a subtle distinction. Decision tables are what you build in Decision Builder. So Decision Builder is like the nice user interface. It's a store application. It gets auto-installed with every family release starting in Tokyo. you can go to Decision Builder in your left nav or in your drop-down nav and open it and create a new decision table. But decision tables are kind of the APIs behind the scenes, the architecture, the capabilities that exist, whether you're using the UI or not. We also have a few other capabilities that make it super easy to leverage decision tables, particularly at the moment in flows and subflows. There's an action called Make a Decision that we'll take a look at, where you can point to a specific decision table and more easily configure the way you want it to run. But we also have a whole set of APIs for execution where you can call a decision table anywhere you're using script, like Lisa had mentioned.
Mm-hmm. That is so awesome. I really like this part. You can replace all the switch case statements.
That's the dream. Hopefully everyone's dream after we dive into all of this. So let's take a quick tour through the history of decision management. I'm not going to get into all of the details. It's going to be much more interesting through demos. But like I mentioned, decision tables have been part of the platform since Madrid as a list and forms experience. We also had that action within Flow Designer and callable APIs. And since the inception of decision tables, they've been used within change management to manage change approval policies. So if you've ever done any sort of change approval policy work, you're already an expert at decision tables. We really started the initiative around making decisions a low-code experience and a user-friendly UI for our Rome release. In our Rome family release, which had an associated store release, we launched Decision Builder and basically said, we have this incredibly powerful capability. We call it a decision table. When you look at it, it's just lists and forms. There's no table. So we were like, let's build a table and let people actually use this the way it's intended to be used. And we have been adding capabilities and features based on opportunity spaces and feedback since then. So in San Diego, we did a major release and added capabilities around more ways to return data from a decision table. So if you're running a bunch of rules, you used to only be able to return a single record per rule. And now there's a lot more freedom around what you can do with results. We'll take a look at that in the demos. We added support for delegated development and integrated with App Engine Studio in San Diego. And then in our Tokyo release, our major new initiative was exporting and editing in Excel, which we'll take a look at today. We built what is called Change Approval Policy Builder, which is a bit of a mouthful, but is the user interface for using Decision Builder for change approval policies, as well as some capabilities around complex decisions and bringing more of that compatibility from what you used to be able to do to what you can do now. Some new roles and support for localization. And then in our Utah release, the main thing that you will see on our user interface is the addition of a default result, which we'll take a look at, and support for currency. We also built support for the Make a Decision action within Flow diagramming, if any of you are diagramming users of Flow. And a major initiative we worked on in partnership with some of our application teams was new APIs that let you create and modify decision tables programmatically. So this is something that can be really valuable if you want to use an API to create the structure of a decision table, but then you might want to have someone who's the subject matter expert actually go in and do the manipulation of what the rules should be, what the logic should be, and get into kind of the details of it, not the structure.
Yeah. Let me find the link for you so I can post it in chat. There was a live coding happy hour of our colleagues in the developer advocacy program a while back, and they did a whole hour on creating results and conditions with the APIs. So
yeah, you can learn from them.
That's so awesome. We have two questions I think we can address at this point. The first one is there a licensing cost for decision tables?
No, decision tables and Decision Builder are part of the platform. So you get them for free. One thing, not around licensing, but one thing I'll mention around application access is that we true up Decision Builder with all of our family releases. So if you upgrade to Utah, you'll get Decision Builder. If you upgrade to Tokyo or have a Tokyo instance, you'll have it. But the way store releases work, you are always trued up to one release behind. So what I would recommend for anyone who's on the administration side is that when you're moving to a new family release, look for applications, store applications that are available for upgrade, because we will always launch major new features at the same time as a family release. And so to take advantage of those features, you need to go into system applications and just update Decision Builder.
Decision Builder. Awesome. And then there's a second question. Are there restrictions on triggers that can be used with make a decision under decision table inputs, for example, like choice, true, false, decimal? Are there any restrictions, or can we use any kind of inputs?
Great question. On the user interface, we support a subset of field types. So for using Decision Builder, you'll see that there's all of the most common input types are available. If you do have a use case where you want to use decision tables, you have an input that is not one of our supported input types, you can kind of flip off the UI and go back behind the scenes to the lists and forms experience. And if that's something that you find yourself needing to do to take advantage, please be in touch. And I believe we have some KB documentation on how to do that, but if you just reach out to me as well, I can help you sort through that. And also it's great for us as a product team to be able to understand what those use cases are and make sure that we're accounting for common needs.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sweet. Okay, let's do a quick tour through some of the new features I just mentioned. And then I'm going to spend the bulk of the time on demos because I think that's really where the value is here. So new in San Diego, which feels like the ice ages compared to where we are now. I think that was the February 2022 launch, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yes, I think so. San Diego is the release we built our last knowledge labs on.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. That's why, because I was like, right now I'm building a knowledge lab on Utah, so that makes sense.
Yes. If you don't know yet, meet us at Knowledge. We'll be there.
We'll see you in Vegas. So in San Diego, we did our first major architecture change for decision tables, and it really unlocked a ton of capabilities around what you can use decision tables for, how to make them user-friendly and like business user-friendly, and really what it comes down to is what you see here in these results. So before San Diego, a decision table could only ever have one result column. So for a given rule, if you had, let's say you wanted to say, if the due date is more than a week ago, then, return X result. You could only return one result value and it had to be a record. And so there was no ability to return any other field types. There was no ability to return two different values for a given rule. With our San Diego release, we unlocked all of that. So you can now add more than one result column for a given decision table, and you have the option to add result columns of different field types. So like I said, with inputs, we don't support every possible field type with results. And if there's a field type that you're really missing for your use case, please be in touch. But we do support all common field types, and that way you can add new columns that are returning data that you can use in subsequent steps in your flow or in subsequent actions within your script based on the appropriate field type. Then in Tokyo, the major initiative that we took on was this export to Excel, work in Excel, and import from Excel. This is the kind of overview of what it looks like, and you'll see these instructions when you use the feature. Doesn't really begin to showcase the value of that, so we'll leave that to a demo to really get into it. And we also within Tokyo built Decision Rule View, which we'll take a look at in the demo.
Yes, one of the questions in the Q&A panel, I'll just answer real quick. Can we get multiple results? Absolutely. Since San Diego, we can, and it's amazing.
And in both ways. So you can get if you have a single decision, you can get two results for that decision, but you can also say, I want to run through every single rule in this table. And if more than one of them is true, I want to return a list of results. So you can get more than one value for a given rule, and you can get values for more than one rule, if that doesn't make your head explode. And the way I think about it is like, actually, I think approvals are a really good example. You might have a decision table with one result column that is, one result column that is the approver, and it has, a name and it's a reference to a sysuser record. And then you might have a different result column in that decision table that is, let's say, yeah, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but another value
maybe
thing.
a group
Sorry?
for escalation for so if it's a high
Yeah,
priority, you can have multiple levels for approval, and so maybe the first level will be the person, and the second level, depending on priority, will be a group.
Yeah, well, and then the other thing I was going to say is that if you want, you can either say run through my rules, and the first time a rule evaluates to true, that is the approver, like return this approver, this is the person who has to approve. You could also say evaluate all my rules, and for every one that's true, generate a list. So depending on your use case, you might want to say this person's the approver. On another use case, you might want to say the approver is one of anyone in this list that was generated. And so you set up that way of looking at things when you're actually setting up your execution. So either in Flow Designer or in your API call.
All right. We're getting a lot of questions coming in. I will post the session. One is asking for a decision builder session, and absolutely, Julia's working on it. So I'll post the link once I find it on the agenda. And then maybe while we're talking about rules, what is the minimum role required about to call the new API in Utah? That's probably in the next slides, right?
It is not in the slides, the actual role required, but we have a role for the API executions. So I might have to follow up with the actual name for that, but we do provide, because we wanted to have a role for the basically what if you're working in ServiceNow, and let's say you've set up the new APIs to work with a UI action, so someone clicks a button and it automatically generates a decision table. What we wanted to allow was for that person, even if they don't have a high level of decision builder access, they can still, through the API, create a decision table. And so we have a separate role that you can give to users to allow for creation via API that's independent of the level of permissions they have in our UI. Hopefully that answered the question without making it more confusing.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And roles are something we've been working on in the last year. You'll see here that in our second Tokyo release, we did add a couple new roles and improve our existing roles to allow for more limited access roles. So, the decision rule author is someone who can do everything within the table, but they can't change the inputs and they can't change the structure of the table. And that just creates a space for kind of safe editing. If you're building a flow based on an expected structure and then someone changes that structure, there's a risk there. So decision rule author is like someone who has free reign over the decisions, but not free reign over the decision table. And then decision result editor is an even narrower role. It's someone who, they don't control the rules, they don't control the structure. All they do is say, given this rule, what should the result be? So that might be someone who is really on the subject matter expertise side. The logic has already been put in place, but they're the person who's going in and safely saying, given this logic, here's what it should be. So, you might have rules around product promotion or discount, and you might have the person on the marketing team who comes in and sets all the discount percentages or the loyalty levels depending on the conditions in your decision table. All right, let's do a quick talk through Utah.
Yeah.
You've already seen this in most of our slides, but in Utah, we released this lovely little row here in the decision table, the default result. It's one of those things that looks small, but is very mighty. And I think saves people a lot of confusion and headaches. Basically, what this does is say, you have all of your rules in a decision table. Each rule has a corresponding result. When you execute your decision table, you run through all of the rules. What should happen if no rule evaluates to true? what should happen if, somebody submits a catalog request for an item and the category is hardware and you don't have a rule for it. In that case, in some use cases, it might be the best outcome to not return anything. I think of that as like, sometimes we use decision tables for exceptions to existing rules. Like in ServiceNow, you have that the prioritization matrix where you have like auto set prioritization for tasks based on a couple criteria, but you might want to use a decision table for exception scenarios. So in that case, you really only want to return a value if there's an exception, not if not if a rule doesn't fire. But in a lot of cases, you want that catch-all. So in this case, if none of these things apply, you still have a result that will be returned with your decision table. And that can help protect around, in this case, if you added a new category and you hadn't updated your decision table yet, you'd still have something to be returned. You would still have, some default of an approval required or an assignment group to set.
And the good thing is, so before we only had the option when we use decisions in Flow Designer, there was the option for an otherwise branch, but that is, I think, also only available if you do branches. So if you want to continue your logic without branches, you wouldn't have the option to have an otherwise result. So this default result from the decision table from Decision Builder is available for those cases, but also if you call the table and get the decision through the API. So if you call it from a script somewhere, you can still get this default result. So I think that's an amazing improvement.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think there's still, if you don't want a default result, there's still value in that otherwise feature in Flow Designer, because really
yes,
what that's saying is if you have a result, follow these paths. And if there's no result, follow a different path. And so it's more about routing that automation rather than the actual data that's returned.
Yeah.
But yeah, this definitely expands what you can do around making sure all scenarios are covered. And then the last thing, which I have an absence of screenshot for, I didn't really know what to put in here, so we're just going to talk about it briefly, is what we mentioned around the new CRUD APIs that were released in Utah. And so these extend the decision table API and give you the ability to do a lot of programmatic creation and management, which, as I mentioned as an example, if you wanted to have a set of rules related to a record and you wanted to automatically generate that table, you could use a UI action and call these APIs. But definitely, like, this is a new feature. We built it partially for some of our internal ServiceNow partners. So if you find yourselves really, finding a way to make it even more useful for your customers or your users and your use cases, let us know. We always love to hear how the features we create are being used in ways that we didn't even expect. I think we should jump into demos. Let me just pause. Yes. If there's anything in the chat or Q&A that we should address before we get our hands.
Just thumbs up and thanks. That was what I was looking for. So all questions answered for the time being.
Fantastic. Yes. Well, let's all hope that nothing I have open is timed out. But I want to walk through a few different demos that will show you some of the new features we've been talking about. And we will start with an example of determining a discount for a customer. So in this scenario, we're looking at a flow here. This flow triggers when a customer service case is closed. And so what we want to do here is, based on the consumer's loyalty level, we're going to send them a different discount percentage. So for their next order, they're going to get a discount because they had a problem with their order. And this is the scenario as it's set up before you're using a decision table. So when I was talking about a lot of hard-coded if statements and nested conditions, this is, without a decision table, probably the most streamlined way you can do something like this, which is having a flow variable that's capturing that discount percent and saying, if the customer loyalty program of this consumer is the gold program, then if that's true, you can set a flow variable value and say the discount percent is 20%. And if they're not gold, then check if they're silver. And if they are silver, set it to 15%. And if they're bronze, set it to 10%. And if they're not in a loyalty program, set their discount to 5%. And then we're going to go through and update the case with the discount we're giving them and send a notification. So looking at this, we're going to use a decision table to get rid of all of this hard-coded logic that we have built here, and I'll show you some of our new features as we do that.
I mean, the thing is, if we wanted to add another level, that would be quite complicated in this case.
It would, like, I feel like once you get to the point that this is not all very clearly in one screen, you just can never figure it out again. And this is only looking at loyalty program. If you were looking at loyalty program and geography, your flow and head might explode. So we're going to start off with this really simple use case. This is a decision table I've started building to tackle this scenario. So as you can see, we have an input variable here. Our input is consumer record because we're going to be making these decisions based on information about that consumer. So here, to the question that was asked earlier, let me add an input. You can see that these are the different field types that are currently supported in the UI as input field types. One thing that I will call out that is coming soon to a decision builder instance near you is that if you use the choice field type right now, you'll see that you have to enter your choices. With our second Utah release, which comes out right before Knowledge in May, you'll also be able to point to existing choice lists.
I love
that.
So
really make life simpler so you don't need to copy and paste anything.
That also works for result columns, right?
Yes.
Perfect.
It will work for result columns as well, which is very helpful.
Yay.
Yay. All right. So here we have our input. In the decision, all we're looking at is what the customer's loyalty level is. That's what we're going to make our decision on. So I've added a condition column here that looks at a field on the consumer table, and good thing I caught this, not even called the right thing. And it's looking at the loyalty level field from that table. And then the last thing we'll do is add a result column. So based on the loyalty level, we want to choose a discount percent. And I'm just going to set it as an integer because we're not going to calculate with it. We're just going to send it in a notification to the customer. But like you can see here, these result types where you can have choice, currency, date, time, and this full list of field types. This is all from San Diego forward. We're continuing to add new field types that we support here. But hopefully this gives you a lot more flexibility than you used to have. So we'll set an integer type. And now you have the structure of your decision table. And all we need to do now that we have this structure is actually add the rules. So we'll translate everything we had in here into here, which is remarkably simple. So we can say if you are enrolled in gold as the first condition, if you're enrolled in silver as the second, if you're enrolled in bronze as the third, and then we'll use our default result for folks who are not enrolled in a loyalty program. And then you just fill out what should that discount percent be. So for gold, we'd said it was 20%. For silver, it's 15. For bronze, it's 10. And then if they're not in a program, it's 5%. And we have now taken everything that was in all of those if statements and put it into this decision table. We can go back into Flow Designer and implement that decision table into this discount flow, if it loads. There we go. All right, so this is what we had to start with. What we're going to do now is add flow logic for making a decision. And that will bring up this action here. We're going to decide the discount percentage. We have that decision table we just created, which was called discount percent based on loyalty. And then there's a few other settings in this action. You can see that we automatically create branches. What branches do is take you on parallel paths of your flow based on unique results. So it'll create a branch for each of the distinct results in your decision table. But in a scenario like this one, the branching won't actually benefit you because we want to follow the same flow no matter what. We're not looking to do different actions or go in a different direction. We're using the decision table to get the different values. And so if you only want the values and not the pathing, you can just turn branches off, and that will remove them from your flow. This is also what I was referring to earlier around whether you want to get the first decision that matches or a list of decisions. In this scenario, you just want to go through the decision table and say, as soon as one of these is true, return a value, because a consumer can't be in more than one loyalty level. If you wanted to give, there's 5 criteria, they each have a corresponding discount, and you might want to apply more than one discount. That's when you would want to go through and say, run all decisions that match, and you would get a list of results.
And then the list could be walked through with a for each, with for each logic. That's the best path forward then. All right.
Yeah, thanks for calling that out. Yeah, the best path is definitely once you have that list to say for each of those results, go through and do whatever you want with the actual values. And then to wire the decision table up to your flow, all you have to do is connect this input variable with where the data is coming from. So in this case, we have our case record. The case is linked to a consumer. And so the consumer from that case is the consumer that we're running through the decision table. And we've now configured this decision. Now that we have it configured, if you want to take a look, we can use the results from it in a subsequent action. So right now in this flow, to update the record, we're using that flow variable. That's what we've been setting through all of this logic. But if I get rid of this, now that we have the decision table, you can go into the make a decision action. And this is one change I want to call out for anyone who's used decision tables previously when you only had a single result column. We did change the architecture to enable multiple result columns. And so what you do now to use the results is you go through the result record, and then you will get, oh, I did not save these things concurrently. I need to refresh. Sorry, folks. Do a quick page refresh, and then we will see the magic happen.
Magic. While we're waiting for the refresh of the page, we have another comment in chat, and we thought simpler couldn't get any simpler for creating the decision table. Yes, that was incredibly simple.
I'm glad to see it. Yeah, I think our team's guiding principle is what's easy, can it be easier? And that's probably a pretty true guiding principle of everything that happens on the workflow automation team.
Yeah.
Is it intuitive? Can it be even more straightforward?
And while we're talking about it and looking at it, don't you think the flow diagramming view is just so pretty?
You know what?
It is.
I will say I'm so used to the natural language version of Flow, but when I was preparing these demos, I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense.
Right?
I think yes, that might have made me a full convert.
Yeah. The thing is, the linear view is good for building out sometimes if you're going from start to finish, but to get a good view of what your flow actually does, I think the diagramming view is really amazing. And one more update that I want to call out that was introduced in Utah is in the bottom left next to the mini map of your diagram, there's a wonderful button that lets you download this diagram as an image.
Let's do it. Why not?
Because that is so amazing. My favorite, it seems so small, but it is so amazing for your process documentation. You can just print this out or attach it to your process docs. You can attach this to your change request. You can attach it to whatever comes up and give this to the process owner and say, hey, I built out this what you were thinking about. So it's amazing. I love it.
Great. All right, well, I'm going to keep us moving so we can take a look at that Excel feature while we still have some time. Let's finish up this flow. So now we can go back in. We want to set the discount. We're not using the flow variable anymore. We can go back. This is the moment of truth. Result record. Oh, look at that.
It's amazing.
Percent. And so if you had more than one result column, so this decision table only has discount percent. if you had discount percent and responsible contact, and the responsible contact was a user record, when you're in Flow Designer here, if you click through this pill picker, you would see both here. It would say discount percent integer, and it would say responsible contact reference. So this is the way that you get access to anything that's in those result columns. So we will set our discount percent, and then we can do this really nice thing, which is just get rid of all of this. Goodbye.
Wow.
So this is our flow now. So I hope this illustrates what I was saying, which is like, when you're using the purpose-built tool to manage a logic, the logic management is easy and the flow is easy. It's like a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario if you start to find those use cases.
Is that like 2 + 2 = 5 for very large values of 2?
Exactly. All right, well, given our time, let's move over and take a look at the Excel feature for decision tables. I was going to run through this demo, but it might have to wait for another day. Okay, so let me set up this use case. We're not going to do the flow side of things here, but this is a decision table we've created if based on a catalog request. So if somebody submits a request for a new laptop, and one of the questions in that catalog request is, do you have a preference between Mac or PC? This is a decision table that takes in the requested item record as well as a non-reference input for the preference. And that is one thing I want to call out, not a new feature, but just a best practice. If you're building decision tables around catalog items, the way you would approach the structure is to create separate inputs for the actual questions in that catalog item that you want to link up to the decision table. And then when you put it in a flow, you can trigger the flow based on the catalog request, and then you can get catalog variables and hook those up to each of the inputs. So that's either something that, if based on what you've done on the platform, will either make complete sense or make no sense. If you find yourself trying to do it and get stuck, please reach out. But in this case, we're going to look at what someone's operating system preference is and some information from their requested item. And there's going to be a set of rules based on that preference, based on what department they're in, and based on whether they're a VIP employee, about whether what laptop they're going to get. So I actually have a separate decision table that determines whether they're eligible for a new laptop or not. This decision table is saying, all right, if you're eligible, based on this information, what laptop are we going to give you? And I will also caveat that my demo data here is desktop computers, so please don't hold it against me. So in this case, what we've built here so far is the structure of the decision table. This is the columns. You can see that we have all of our details about columns here. It's not actually any of the content of the decision table itself. And that content might be something that you leave up to a business subject matter expert or someone who's more close to the decision making. And you could let them do that in 2 different ways. The first that I will show you is working in Excel. And the second is with roles. And the third is you can combine both and have someone with a limited role who can either work in Decision Builder or export and import from Excel. But let's start with the Excel feature here. So you're able to export a decision table to Excel once you've saved it, and once you have at least, 1 input and 1 condition column and 1 result column. You kind of need that structure in place to export. You'll see some information about the exporting process. And then you will get this template. This is not the template. This is what we're going to put in the template. There we go. And so this is just an empty structure of that decision table. It has a lot more sophistication going on behind the scenes, but ideally it looks the way you expect it to look. We have a tab for instructions. There's some things that are like, wait, how do I do this? So anything that is, not completely intuitive and user-friendly, we have details for here. Things like, how do you manage a between operator? What can we use to go between values? Some information about date, time, and due date. But going back to the decision table, you have drop-down lists of what all the operators are. And these are specific to the field type of this column. So this is not universal. This is because this is choice. Here are the operators available to you. And if you try to use something else, like I think you just try to type, you'll get a validation error and get stuck from doing that. So this is to try to prevent errors. There are some cases where we have suggestion lists, but we won't hold you to those lists. So here you can see the available choice values, but you actually could type something different. And the reason for that is because we have operators like contains and starts with. So there's an infinite number of acceptable options for here. We give you the choice list so that you know what the options are, but we don't constrain you from using all of the operators. So it's kind of trying to manage that balance of how do we prevent errors, but how do we also give you freedom to use Excel the way it's meant to be used. And really where we see the value in this is if you are building a really large decision table, we do everything we can to make Decision Builder as intuitive as possible. But at the end of the day, we're not trying to rebuild a spreadsheet tool. And so if you're trying to build 500 rows, you're probably going to have an easier time doing it in Excel than you are going to have doing it in a clicking
copy pasting
methodology. Yeah, and the other is that oftentimes for different applications, the logic is already being shared back and forth in Excel. And so rather than having to move it from Excel directly, like click and click and click into Decision Builder, we give you this as a bridge to be able to maintain that logic in a way that it is already living. So in this case, I'm just going to show you what it looks like when we add some logic into that decision table. So we'll paste in some rules here. Like you can see, these are following the options available. Same thing with the department. We're choosing one of these available departments. And then there's a list of records here as well. There is a system property if you want to prevent export of any records. So by default, you can do this download and work on a decision table, but we have a system property if you at an administration level want to prevent export of any record names and just require people to type in the names directly. So with this setup, I'm going to save our changes. You can change the name of your file. That's no problem. But when you import, you do need to import a file that was previously exported. So when we export a template, it has a bunch of data behind the scenes, like the CICD and things that will connect your template back into your decision table. And so you'll get an error if you try to just copy this into a new file and import that. But you can always re-export a template if you find that you need that. So let's come back to our decision table here. We'll import and choose that file we were just looking at. And you can see that it immediately brings all of that data from Excel into Decision Builder.
It's magic.
And the other thing I'm just going to show you quickly on that is, let's say we go in here and we start to mess around with things. Let's change that to product management. Let's change this to Linux. I think we can change this to something. Oh, no, that is a validation list. Good. If you try to go through and import this version with errors, let's take a look at what will happen. You will get this message: 3 out of 6 decision rows have errors.
Nice. Yeah.
Because of the way decision tables works, we don't do any partial imports. So either it's importing and it's working, or it's not importing and it's not working. We found that anywhere in the middle just creates more confusion than it solves. But from there, you can download this error file, which you can also access in your import and export history when that loads. But I'm just going to pull it up here.
We just had a question before you did that. It's magic. How to make sure we don't have any error. I think you wonderfully displayed what happens if we have an error.
You can't make, there's no way you can't make sure you have no error. We
Yeah.
do everything we can, but what we try to do with this file is, you can see for each of these errors, we point to the specific cell where you have an error, and we'll tell you what the issue is. So here, there's an invalid reference value. This does not exist. There's an invalid choice value. There's an invalid reference value. And so the other thing that you can do here is if you fix these errors and save this file, you don't need to go back and create a new template. You can import this error file directly once you've corrected it. You don't need to get rid of this column. You can just go back into your decision table. Whoops, I didn't mean to export. You can import. And you can see this is the error file. But when you go to import it, because we fixed it,
Nice.
you now have all the data and you go
That's
ahead and
great.
save that.
Wonderful.
And we have our history here, which I don't know why it's not loading. It's just having a demo moment, of course.
Susan asks, does the import always do a full replacement or is it additive?
It's a full replacement always. And the reason for that is that you can't do a partial export. So when you go to generate that template, it's going to export everything that's already in your decision table. So you're already working with the whole table. And the other reason is that with a decision table, because it executes sequentially, the order is so important that we didn't want to do anything to like append things to the bottom and potentially confuse the order of the rows.
All right. When testing, how can you determine the path the decision table uses?
So yeah, it's a great question. You can't do that necessarily at the moment. Right now, the best place to test a decision table is by dropping it into a flow and running data through it in that flow.
There's another question, and I hope you can all see the answers that I will put there. If there is any Now Learning courses for decision tables. As far as I'm aware, there's currently no Now Learning training, but we do still have last year's Decision Table CreatorCon Lab, Decision Builder. And as mentioned before, Julia is delivering a new one this year at Knowledge, and that one will be available on Now Learning as well, as far as I know.
Yeah, so I will say so there's the CreatorCon Lab last year, which is a very in-depth instructional lab on how to build decision tables. The lab this year is meant to be both new content for folks who attended last year, but also an entry point for anyone who didn't attend last year. So I'm trying to have my cake and eat it too. You guys can all join and let me know if we were successful.
Yes, that would be lovely. And if you're done with the demos so far, did you want to show the ACLs?
I think, are we at time?
Yeah, we are pretty close to time.
I won't show the ACLs. The one thing I want to show, just because the question comes up sometimes, is the decision rule view. For any row in your decision table in this little left menu, you can open in decision rule view, which will give you this condition builder experience. I would say this is something that you should use if you absolutely need it for your use case. It does kind of break the convention of a table. So let's say you wanted to have a new condition set here where you say, you know, the requested item activity is due today, which is completely outside of what your decision table does, but is available with that input data. What you'll get is this experience where you merge across your rows. So we've certainly had customers who have a use case that's perfect for a decision table, but they have one or two pieces of logic that just really need like an or condition or to look at two things, and we don't want to constrain you. So you can do that more sophisticated rule view through this experience. You will lose access to the edit in Excel capability, though we are working for Vancouver to have a way to let you also have your cake and eat it too, and you know be able to work on these rows in Excel even if you can't touch this row in Excel. So stay tuned on that. But if you find yourselves in a scenario where you do really need that, the feature is available.
Awesome. Wonderful. So if you could catch up with the presentation once more so I can get through the last.
Exactly where I'm going.
Few slides. Amazing.
Skip that.
I think those demos were really impressive. Just the reducing like the 10 branches in the flow into like 3 actions and we're done. 1 logic, 2 actions, and we have everything covered. That's so amazing. So
There
we
we go.
will share the presentation. I will share the presentation as a PDF. It also has a couple of more use cases if you need some ideas. As I mentioned at the beginning of this session, we do have more academies. So please join my colleagues. They have a wonderful backlog content, and we really appreciate that you are here with us today. Our next session is in 2 weeks, and my loveliest, bestest colleague, Andrew Barnes, will join me for an amazing session, hopefully, on Flow Designer approvals. So we'll dive really deep into anything Flow Designer approvals, how to do very complex things that you didn't know was possible in Flow Designer. So make sure to join us in 2 weeks. We will then take a little break for knowledge because we'll all be traveling and there's no time for editing videos. And I will pick back up, I think, on June 8th. Together with my colleague Ashley Snyder, and we will be speaking about knowledge management. So sign up for those upcoming sessions. If you don't know yet, there is a Center of Excellence with more workflow automation resources on the community. You can get to it with my wonderful short link with the QR code, and I hope that the content is helpful. It's also collected training, and I think that's about all. Thank you. Thank you so much, Julia. That was an amazing session. Yes. Thank you for joining me, and thank you everybody for being in this webinar. See you next time.
Thanks so much, folks. Hope you all have a great day.
Wonderful. Bye-bye.